Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first lecture on SPSS. This is going to be an introduction to SPSS, a little bit of definition, description of what it is, and then we're going to, for this lecture, I'm going to do a demonstration on how to create an SPSS data view and variable view and import data from an Excel spreadsheet. So there's a lot that we're going to do for today. It's not a lot, but it's, I think when you're learning SPSS, it can feel like a lot. And then for the following lecture after this, we're going to go over a number of other things that we can do with the data before we even get to the analysis part. So let's get started. So SPSS 101, SPSS stands for the statistical packages, statistical package for the social sciences. Really, SPSS, once you learn it, it's pretty easy to use. And I would even say fun sometimes. Once you really get the hang of it, it's a lot of fun to, to create a variable view and create a data set, enter all the data in, and cleaning it up and looking at it from different ways. It's fun because it's very point and click friendly. It's nothing like you're entering in a lot of syntax and formulas and things. So once you get the hang of it, it's not that bad. And I'm gonna be completely honest with you. I probably know about maybe 10% of what SPSS can really do. I'm not an expert, by any means, but I can still perform a number of functions in SPSS, and it's always a learning curve. That whenever I need to learn something new, you figure it out, or you get on and do some tutorials, and then you know it. So my hope for you by the end of this class is that you're going to be able to do some of the more basic, bare bones things related to SPSS. In terms of setting up a data set, maybe cleaning it up a little bit and managing it, and then being able to run some very easy statistics that I think could be could be advantageous to you as you look for jobs in the clinical field or the school field. So SPSS as a system, we use the system to enter and analyze data. And it looks, if you look at when you see an SPSS data set, it's going to look very much like an Excel spreadsheet, except that you can run statistical analyses on the data. I will also show this to you in a minute, but the variables that you're entering into into a data set are all going to be at the top. So it's going to represent the columns of the data set, whereas the rows are going to represent the people. Each row represents one person. So we'll look at that when we get into it. Today's agenda, like I said, we're going to look at the basics of how to structure a data file. Every data file is going to look a little different because every research study is different. So it's just knowing how to run these or how to set it up, and how you're going to be able the best way to set it up that it's easy to use. We're also, like when you set up the variable view, we're going to be able to show you how to distinguish, or help SPSS to distinguish between different types of data. We're going to do this in the first demonstration in terms of entering entering the data in the variable and setting up the variables. The next demonstration will be editing the data, and this is all going to be done using a sample file. Really, in a nutshell, what this slide I think is trying to say is that when you structure a data file and you set everything up, and especially if you're importing data from another source, you want to make sure it all lines up correctly, because if you don't, your entire study will be null and void. Setting up the data file is probably one of the most important things to really hone in on and make sure that you do it correctly. If you don't, all the data, all the results that you get from the data will be incorrect. So today we're going to specifically for this lecture and demonstration, we're going to set up the variable view and the data. In the next demonstration, I'm going to demonstrate how to code variables differently. There are some instruments, like let's say the Beck Anxiety Inventory, that you will derive a score from somewhere on the range of, I think, 0 to 60. And however, that it's all broken up into Likert scales in terms of like 0 to 10 being no anxiety, and then 11 to 25 being minimal anxiety, and then from 26 to 42 being high anxiety, and then anything above that is profound anxiety. Now that isn't the correct ranges. I'm just kind of saying that off the top of my head. But when you enter a continuous variable such as an anxiety score into SPSS, you can also recode it. That can tell you what classification, like what that score actually means. So I'm going to show you how to do that in the next demonstration, and then we're also going to show you how to split a file. That if you want to look at just certain portions of a data set over other ones. And then there's going to be some management tools that I'm going to get into, not in this demonstration, but the next one, in terms of performing case summaries that you can review the data from that angle. That might be a little easier, or might have a little bit more relevance in terms of when you're looking at it. Replacing missing values if you need to do that. I'll show you how to replace missing values if somebody, let's say, completed an instrument, but they didn't complete like every item on the instrument. Well, how do you replace those missing values in the most responsible way possible? Also, being able to compute variables from data that's in SPSS, that could be something that could be of use to you. And then also to recode some data within certain variables. For example, if there are items within an instrument that are inversely coded, which means that before you score them, you have to flip the you have to flip the score to the opposite of what it would be. So like all of the scores of 6s would be flipped to 1. All of the scores of 5s would be flipped to 2, and then 4s to 3s. So it's basically just scoring inverse items on an instrument. Why do we need to do these things? It really, there's no data set that's really static. That if you enter data strictly into an SPSS data set, and if you're not going to do any other analysis but the one, then you would be okay. But in the real world, you want to switch things around and look at things in different ways. So it's these types of operations that are going to help you have gain a wider conceptualization of your data, and it's going to help you understand what SPSS can actually do. So it seems intimidating at first, but once you get the hang of it, it's actually fun, and it's a good time. So, okay, let me get into the SPSS data. Hold on for a second. Okay, so this is an SPSS data set, and it's blank. It has nothing in it. But as I said in the lecture a couple minutes ago, that all of the variables that we're going to enter in are going to be located at the top of each column, and all of the rows are going to represent, each row will represent a participant and the data that is related to that participant. So that's how it's all set up. Now down here are 2 buttons that are very important. You have the data view, which is where we're at, we'll be able to see all the raw data and scored subscales and all of that. And then we also have the variable view. The variable view is where we enter in all of the variables, and we tell SPSS what kind of variable it is. We add values to the variables if they're discrete variables, and also if we have to let SPSS know what the measurement data, what kind of measurement data each variable represents. So if you remember the different kinds of variables, we have nominal variables that are categorical. We have interval variables that are somewhat categorical, but they're also on a rank order. And then we have the interval and ratio data. Now, SPSS does not delineate between interval and ratio data All SPSS does simply is it labels both of those data types as scaled measurement. So because to SPSS, if it's interval or greater, interval or ratio, it's going to be considered, it's going to be ran the same way. So let's pretend for a moment that you are at a, well, let's say, I don't know, let's say at a clinic for now. And your clinic was running 3 different types of groups to determine if, which group might actually produce the best results in terms of, let's say, depression scores. And these 3 groups, let's say the first group was just what they've been doing all along, very atheoretical, very, a lot of psychoed, just general support group. The second group was, let's say, a Gestalt group that people were engaging in. And then the third group was a CBT group that targets depression. So if we look at, I'm going to go over to the Excel spreadsheet. Let's pretend for a moment that that your clinic has been collecting the data over the last several months on these 3 groups that started, several months ago. And nobody knew how to run SPSS. Nobody knew how to analyze the data in SPSS until you got there, because they hired you because you knew how to do that, because you told them in the interview. So let's pretend for a moment that you need to set up the data set and the variable view in SPSS. But they've been recording it all very neatly and nicely and orderly in an Excel spreadsheet. They just don't know what to do with it after this. So, okay. The first thing we have to do is set up the variables. So if you look at the top, the variables that they've collected is the client's ages, gender, the race, their education levels, what group they're in terms of, are they in the control group? Are they in the Gestalt group? Are they in the CBT group? And then the depression pretest scores, depression scores at 5 weeks, depression scores post 1. So that let's pretend that this is 3 months out from 3 months out from when they left the group, and then post test 2 scores is 6 months out. So first thing we have to do is set up the variables. So in your you might want to pause this and just kind of write them down if you want. I have them written down, or yeah, they're all written down for me already. So I'm just going to show you how to enter them into SPSS. Okay, first line, since their first variable is age, I'm going to start with age. So you just type in age, hit the tab button or the return button or the enter button, whatever you got, and all of this will come up. Now, we want to make sure that the type of variable is going to be numeric because it's going to recognize numbers, but that's always the default, so you don't have to worry about that. Don't worry about the width. Don't worry about the label, because we can label variables if, let's say, this was an item in an instrument, and you had, let's say, 100 items in this instrument, and you labeled and then you entered each item as a variable on its own. Then you might want to type in the item itself, so that way kind of it's descriptive. Since age, if we go back and look at how they asked people, like, how old are you? They asked for a specific age. How old are you exactly? And it looks like everyone gave a specific age. So that means this variable is a continuous variable, which means that it would qualify as a scale measurement. So no values are needed for age. So we have the name of the variable, we have no values are needed, and it's measured as scale data or scale measurement. The next one is gender. And we type in gender. And gender is a discrete variable because there are only so many values that can describe gender. So that would be a nominal measurement data. And the values, we have to tell SPSS what numbers designate or represent the different values. So let's pretend for a moment that if we go back over here, we have gender as a bunch of ones and twos. So let's pretend for a moment that when they ask people on the survey, what is your, what gender do you identify? They would have circled, let's say, men, women, or transgender. And ones would designate or represent women, twos would represent men, and threes would represent transgender. So what we would do is we'd type value 1, type in the label woman, or women, I'm sorry, women, add 2, then, and then 3, transgender, and then hit add. Now all we've done is added these to the box. We have to hit OK for them to be entered into the system. So once you add them in, then they are now part of, now they are part of the values. So now we've told SPSS within this variable, all the ones mean women, all the twos mean men, and all of the threes represent transgender. And that's all we have to do for this one. So the next one is race. And I'm not going to type in all of the racial groups for this. This is just an exercise on how to do it. So race is a measurement of nominal, because nominal data or nominal variables are just descriptive. They're just categorical. And we might want to say that the value ones are twos are Asian, and let's just say threes, European, American. Just, I mean, and there are other groups. Just for the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to leave it at 3. So, but you can type in as many as you want. SPSS will, we recognize all the ones that you typed in and assign a number to them. Hit OK, and all of the values are listed. So now SPSS, like I said before, SPSS will recognize all the ones under race as African American, label all the twos as Asian American, and all of the threes as European American. All right, fourth, we have education. Type that in. And education is actually ordinal data because it's a rank order, because a 4-year bachelor's degree is more education than a high school degree, and graduate studies or graduate degrees is more than an undergraduate degree. So just for the sake of simplicity, we're going to put a value of 1, high school, 2, college, and 3, graduate school. Hit OK. And now SPSS knows that under education variable, ones are designated as high school, twos are undergraduate, and threes are graduate. And last we have, well, for discrete variables, we have groupings. And we have 3 groups, like I said. Group 1, the control group, can be labeled under value 1. Control group. 2 is Gestalt group. 3, value 3 is the CBT group. So if you go back over to the Excel spreadsheet where all the raw data is, everyone in group 1 is going to be designated as the control group. Everyone in group 2 will be designated as the Gestalt group, and everyone in group 3 is the CBT group. So basically, we're just telling SPSS what all of this stuff means. Okay, now we're going to get into the actual data for depression scores. So the first one we have is the pretest. Now, when you type in the names of the variables, SPSS does not like spacing between letters. So if I typed in pre, hit the space bar, and then hit test, and typed in test, and hit OK, it's going to say there's a variable name contains an illegal character. Well, the illegal character is the space. I don't know why they haven't fixed this, but they haven't. So what we have to do, if you want a space between words, you have to put an underline between them, pretest. Now, since pretest is going to be the overall score of some depressive test, it looks like it's going to be continuous variable, right? So it's going to be scale measurement. So you would put it as scale. And since it is scale measurement, there's really no need to put a value because it's not a discrete variable, it's continuous. And really what you're doing is most likely it's going to be the same depressive instrument that you're using for the pretest, the 5 weeks in, the post 1, and the post 2. So all you have to do is name them differently. So 5 weeks, and then post 1, and then post 2. Oops. Okay. And they are all scale measurement. So you just want to put scale, 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 oops, scale. So all scale measurement, no values needed for scale measurement. I also like to change all the decimals to 0, just because it makes the data look neater. It's not as messy. And if you double click, hit copy, highlight, and then hit paste, they all turn to 0. So that's just a easy, efficient way of saving time. Oh, groupings, that is also going to be nominal. So now we've set up our variable view. We have the names of the variables. The types are always going to be numeric. Don't worry about that. We're not going to get into string variables or anything crazy. The decimals, this is my personal preference, is going to be set at 0. The values for the discrete variables or the nominal or ordinal variables are all set up. And all of the measurement data are described to SPSS in terms of what is what. So we're all set. So now we go to the data view. And if you notice, all of the variables are at the top. And all of the, and their measurements, the little measurement icons are also with them. So for race, we have nominal variables. For the pretest, we have scale, and all of the, the pretest, the 5 weeks, post 1 and post 2 is all scale. And then for education, we have interval. Okay, so now we need to transport the data over to SPSS, which there's a lot of ways that you can do this. And if you're set up with, like a thing like SurveyMonkey, and you've collected all your data through SurveyMonkey, then if you have the gold standard SurveyMonkey, that you pay a lot of money for, it will import it straight to SPSS for you. I never was afforded that luxury. I always had to import it myself, or a long time ago, before people were doing online surveys, I was entering the data in by hand from handwritten, hand completed surveys, which was a real pain. But if your data looks like this, which is basically already entered into Excel, all you have to do is highlight it, copy it, and paste it. And there you have it. All of your data has been entered into SPSS. All of your variables have been created. And most importantly, you want to make sure that your data matches up with your, if you've copied and pasted, that your data is matching up with your variable. So just to double check, you want to make sure. You just want to look at the first participant, 22 years old, female, their race is number 2, education's number 2, grouping's number 1, all the way over. You want to make sure all of that lines up the same way over here in SPSS, because if it's off and you try to analyze your data, you're going to be analyzing it incorrectly, and if you don't catch it, your results are going to be incorrect, and you could be doing something really bad there. So, okay, so that is the first lecture in SPSS on how to create a data view and a variable view, set up your data, import it over. I would recommend practicing this. And what I'm going to do is I'm probably going to have I might have the same Excel spreadsheet with the data from this lecture in the week's module, and I recommend that you play around with this and you practice how to set up your variable views and import your data. All right, if you have any questions about any of this, please reach out. If not, have a great week.